Welcome, everyone, to the Lighter Mind podcast. In the Lighter Mind, we explore spirituality, personal growth, trauma, recovery, and the path to wholeness. The Lighter Mind podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any forms of mental illness. We are not licensed therapists unless otherwise noted, and these are experiential conversations. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Lighter Mind podcast. All right, so last week we were talking a little bit about Stoicism, and we wanted to dive a little bit back into that kind of stuff. We also wanted to dive into a heavier topic on like how to deal with death and how to deal with grief and stuff like that. So this is going to be a heavier conversation that we're going to have today, but it's also very necessary, and it's also something that I feel like if you're human, you have to deal with, a lot of things that we talk about on here. And I wanted to talk about some stuff that I've been doing for myself this week with practicing, I guess it's mindfulness, it's a little bit of stoicism. It's, it's been kind of like the theme for my week, but it's just, and I've talked about this on here before, but it's watching the ways that I make myself suffer. And so within like the vein of stoicism, it's about what you can control and not focusing on like what you can't control. And one of those things that I've been really paying attention to this week within, my own recovery is the stories that I create inside of my head and the amount of suffering that my thinking tends to cause me. When something happens or doesn't happen, I have this tendency to create this narrative in my head, that is either, I'm looking at stuff in retrospect, or I'm looking at stuff in the future. And so I've been noticing, and that's really what I've been trying to do this week is just kind of notice, where my brain is going. And, one of the things that I noticed that I've been doing, and I'm sure all the listeners and you guys can relate to this, is we have some type of interaction that happened to us. So we have some type of event. Someone snubbed us, someone cut us off in traffic, someone didn't text us back, like, something happens. And my brain has the tendency to create this story or this narrative based off of assumption, based off of judgments, based off of trying to read people's minds. Like, it creates this whole story around what I think actually happened during some type of interaction. And once I create whatever like this narrative is, I tend to attach energy to it, and then anxiety. I have some type of anxiety, or I have bitterness, or I have resentment, or I start comparing myself to others, or I shame myself, or I have some type of like negative experience that comes out of something that I have created in my head. And then when I look into the future, I do the same kind of thing, but that's more where like the worry comes in. That's where the anxiety comes in, where I am trying to predict what is going to happen. And I've been talking to people a lot this week about, the ways that we try to control things that are very, very clearly out of our control. And the unpredictability of the future is one of those things. And I always bring it back to this place of safety. So for me in recovery, I'm sure people that are not in recovery too can very much relate to this, that when we have too many question marks in the future or in anything around us, it creates like this sense of, I don't know, nervous system flare up. We have the fear, the worry is just kind of like a sense of unease. And really what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is when I'm trying to knock out some of those question marks in the future, I tend to once again create some type of narrative or some type of story that is usually based around an expectation or an assumption. And it creates anxiety, worry, dread, like all these kinds of things that, like, I'm making shit up in my head, and as as Seneca says, we tend to suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. And so I've really started to pay attention to, when I'm in the shower, when I'm washing the dishes, when I'm in some of those participating in some of those activities that, muscle memory can take me through it, and so I don't necessarily have to show up and be present for like what I'm doing. But in those moments, I have that tendency, my thoughts have this tendency to, oh, I don't know, start creating problems. And I've started to um really try to start letting some of that stuff go. Some of these like narratives, and trying to approach it with grace, and kind of gracefully detaching from some of these unhelpful thoughts, that I tend to, I just think that I think so much. I think that there's a lot of intelligent people out there, and I think that one of the burdens of being intelligent is that we have the tendency to overthink. And that creates problems when we start to think and we start to imagine fictitious scenarios, and we start to do all these kinds of things. And I've noticed that, like, since I've been letting some of this stuff go and really focusing on like the present moment, focusing on like what I can control right in this very second, and really showing up for this, just like what is happening right this second, I'm happier because of that. I think I'm a little bit more peaceful. And I don't know. I think that this has been like I was talking with McCrae at work this week. For those of you listeners who were on here when McCrae was here, that we have the tendency to bullshit around a lot at work. But him and I were talking about how, like, I almost kind of wish that, like, early in recovery someone would have explained, I this that my thinking is like one of the major problems. Like, if you go into any type of 12-step meeting or anything like that, we have like these little cliche things like, Crow, do you know what I'm talking about? So we have like the think, think,
Hmm.
think up on the wall, but it's like upside down. It's to let you know that like your thinking's wrong. And then we have, I had people say in the past that, like, oh, like, the 12 steps like are like brainwashing, but my brain needed to be washed, and like, all these little things. But it's, no one really explained to me what the fuck that actually meant. Like, what does it mean that like my thinking is like the root of most of my problems, like what does it actually mean for
Yeah.
me that, like, I mean I create, like we were talking about before the pod, we hit play today. We create that sense of danger that's like happening now, especially if there is no danger happening around us. Like, so I don't know, it's been an interesting week of really trying to be mindful and trying to be present. um just what is Kyle doing? Where is Kyle's mind going? And so it's been interesting for me.
Yeah, I definitely can relate, and I realized when I sobered up after 20 years or whatever it was of drinking that I realized one of the reasons I started drinking was because of my thinking. So that once I stopped drinking, then I gave up my drinking for a thinking problem. So it all came back. It's just that I never learned as a child or anything else there how to handle the thoughts. And it so that's I think was what led me to my drinking. is to get rid of those thoughts, to avoid and evade and hide and run from those, because I never understood how they were working. And I took them as real. And I never learned that. And I liked what you said about the expectations. I want to get to that. But I like what you said in that. How do I stop in the moment and say, okay, this is where I'm at. Look at my body, ground into here and now, breathe, and really focus in on the most. It sounds really stupid. It sounds so fundamentally stupid that we can't relinquish that as reality. But the reality is you're in your breath right now. There and we have to bring it into a very start small, if you will. And I didn't realize it was so small. I still realized, but that goes back to that expectation piece as well. That I like that you made me think of something on that, is that if I didn't have any present danger in my reality, everything was fine, everything was, you know, comfortable. There was no danger, and I was safe. Then I was going to create an expectation that I knew could not be matched in order to get me back to that emotional home base. So that I would be disappointed, I would be let down, there would be something to fear. It was this perpetual cycle that would make my nervous system feel comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Mm,
So, and I never realized that. And that's something that developed in me as a child that I didn't realize was happening as I got older and older. Everything seemed to be like it should be better. It should be more. I should be more calm. The older I get, the more I should have, shit together in life. Well, the nervous system still was acting on its primal, uh, uh, f- just ingrained hardwire that I didn't realize. And it still has a tendency to do that, to get back to that something's wrong or something will be wrong in the future state. And now I have better tools. I'm better equipped to say, wait a minute, slow the frame. And it's going back to that piece too that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with McRae, was that metacognition, that metacognitive state to where you can start to step outside yourself momentarily enough to slow the frame, override what the brain is scanning the horizon for, which is danger, fear, the unexpected, fearful events, and stop and look at my thoughts of that's what my brain is doing, but that's not reality, and we're okay. So until I could step away from my thoughts, look at my thoughts and not through them to identify with them, then I was still on that hamster wheel, and my nervous system would still get fed uh, the negative narrative. But that was the what I learned. Um, it was the only way to stop that frame and slow it, is to basically take that power away from my brain, because my brain's job is not to to make me feel good, or it's not. My brain's job is our brain's job, I should say, is not to. Um, it's not about our emotional state and our well-being and our happiness. It's wired for survival. That's it. And so I was leaving too much in the brain and not enough in the heart and in my body to be able to ground in. So I needed that sort of default interrupter thought
mm,
to say, okay, wait a minute, that's the brain. You're doing great. You're fine, but you're doing your job. But That's not what's happening here and now.
Mm,
And that is a first, you have to become aware that that's how it works neurologically. And then, second, is you have to be able to catch those thoughts in the moment. If you just try to overgloss it in the moment, then the day goes by, I get distracted, I forget about it. And then at the end of the day, it's still going to catch back and snap you in the ass,
mhm.
in the form of all kinds of out of control thoughts that I try to piece together and make sense of. So they had to be stopped in the moment. And
Mm.
that takes a lot of time alone to work on that, as to not be distracted by the outside world, because the outside world would take me away from when it's happening in real time. So,
Yeah, that's one of those things that I had to learn the hard way. I I like to bring up the metaphor of pushing a beach ball under the water.
mhm,
So like what ends up happening if you push a beach ball under the water and then you let that thing go? It shoots up higher than like the surface of the water. And so when we have the tendency to avoid certain emotions or certain thoughts or something like that, it tends to exacerbate the problem. And I think that that is something that I really had to learn the hard way, that like if I don't deal with whatever is coming up for me right now, it's going to make it worse, because it's energy. It's like where it has nowhere to go, and so there, and a lot of the times I think that some of those, well, not a lot of times, but like sometimes some of those thoughts and some of those feelings and stuff that come up in us, they're kind of like they're trying to tell us something, like so, and if you pay attention to it, even if it is uncomfortable, because it does take like when we're starting to examine and like deal with some of those thoughts and those emotions and some of those things that like come up in real time, it takes a certain amount of like being okay with discomfort and
mhm,
being able to sit with whatever that is. But if you can be okay with some of that discomfort and sit with it as it arises, it goes away,
mhm,
instead of like when, like you were saying that like if you don't deal with it and you kind of procrastinate, you avoid it, you push it off, like it's going to come back later that evening. And then if you don't deal with it that evening, guess what? It's going to be first thing on your mind in the morning. And then if you push it out, so it's just going to keep happening until eventually it's going to consume you and it starts to become obsessive, and I had to learn that with like a lot of my stuff. I want to back it up just to make sure that I fully understand when you talk about when you talk about looking at your thoughts as opposed to looking through your thoughts. What does that mean to you?
what that means is I'm not identifying with them as real. And
Mm,
so it's the ability to step outside, as the Stoics used the Stoic practice of what was called the view from above. You're looking at yourself thinking, and and then asking more questions inside that. Why did that thought arise? Where did that thought come from? Does that thought serve me? What is the purpose of me continuing to think that narrative? There's a reason for all of these things, and none of them. And now I can start parceling it out and saying, is it true? Is it real? What is the real meaning behind the fact that I keep coming back to this feeling or this emotion? There has to be something more, or that I'm creating more of a scenario outside of that in my head, the what ifs, that it should have been, or it could have been possibilities that even further build out on that. And then stopping and asking, why am I doing this? Because it's doing something for my body and my nervous system. And there's a reason that I'm not aware of. So without being able to study it, where the thought comes from and why it keeps arising and making me feel this way, then it's just going to manipulate me and make me feel that way and keep me in a perpetual state of that feeling. Now, does that make sense?
Well,
Does
yeah,
that
of course, of
so
course.
so otherwise I'm just on autopilot and I'm allowing myself to be in a state of despair and a state of despondency or a state of just unhappiness and depression and anxiety. But until I start questioning what's the purpose of that, that I keep coming back and revisiting this thought, then there's something underlying it that's driving me and my brain to do that, right? And it doesn't allow space for the alternate or the alternative thought
Mhm.
of anything that's positive in the situation, anything that just the allowance and the letting go-ness of the situation. And this, I guess, if that, I hope that fills in some of those blanks, Kyle, but this is where to pull in what Alan was talking about earlier, um, that can we see now how in a state of, in a place where we come to lose somebody in our life, right? We got to deal with death. This is just how it goes. But now we're on total free reign and we have a tendency to create more of some of the loss than is reality, around perhaps a death. And I can let Alan speak to this, but when we do, and we continue to revisit the what ifs and the inside that keep me in a perpetual locked in state of despair and feeling of emptiness and everything else, because um, there's a purpose that serves us, and we want to stay there, right? And because at least uh, I understand it and I can control that.
Mm. That control is huge in there.
Well, it equals safety, right?
Yeah.
And that's the slippery part, is even if it's a bad thought, a bad feeling, or a bad emotion, if I know it, then I can control that. It's the same
Mm.
thing with my state of drinking. But Alan, what are your
Well,
thoughts on this?
I'm gonna go all the way back to the start
Okay.
where Kyle was talking about washing dishes. So this is where mindfulness plays in, right?
Mhm.
So you were saying how you're just mindlessly washing the dishes. Well, right there tells you there's a problem
Mhm.
because you're just doing it mindlessly. Like when I wash dishes or do whatever, I'm like, want the sensations. I'm like, well, how does this feel on my hand? How does the soap feel? How does the water feel? Instead of just like sitting there going, well, having your little predictive brain worrying about shit that's reality. You said reality a lot. I don't know what reality is. You tell me. Your reality and my reality are different. So reality is a vague fucking concept. Like, what is real?
Mhm.
I don't even know. Is that fucking whatever's out the window real? I don't know. So, so I think you've got, and you said hardwired, and I don't think the brain is hardwired. I think the brain runs a software program based on what has happened to you and your experience, and you can rewrite that program. And I was trying to find that Instagram reel where that guy was talking about gradual steps to reprogram your prediction machine, right? Um, so the threat thing is, I mean, I guess the hardwired part is evolutionarily we're looking for threats, right?
Yeah.
But I was telling my little 8-year-old buddy the other day, he was going skiing for the first time and he was very scared. And he thought he was scared of the height of the chairlifts, which I knew he wasn't going to go on because I've been skiing since I was 8. And I said, dude, bad thoughts are just thoughts. If you tell it, that's just as bad thought. Like he's like, I'm scared I'm going to get hurt. I'm this and that. I'm like, well, none of this has happened, and these are just thoughts. right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can identify it as a thought, is these stupid things we worry about, if you can say it's just a thought, it's not real. It's not real to me. It might be real in the big picture, like getting nuked or whatever. It might be real, but it's irrelevant, right? So what your brain is doing is sitting there trying to fill in the blanks based on previous interactions. Like you can go into a room of people and say, and your brain has already kind of filled in exactly what's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do a little incremental change, start the conversation in a different way, do this to override the pre-programmed reality, whatever you want to call it, but what you think of as your prediction machine, and you can say, well, this is going to be a different situation. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this to change that. Like our interaction with like former bandmates can be exactly like they were 45 years ago or 40 years ago, however long it was we were playing, right? Or we can go into that situation and change. Like, I look at our former drummer in a different light now than I used to. And now my interactions with him are much more positive. And because I had a predictive brain saying this is what this guy does, but I don't care anymore. Back then it was like existential for me, like he's shagging the girl I like or whatever, and that's so stupid. So that's kind of where I think, you got the mindfulness comes in. Like, you can be mindfulness that you can override the prediction machine and don't, if you just do things mindlessly, your mind is going to try to fill that moment, right? So like, I'm not back cleaning up dog shit. I'm just like trying to even, be like mindful about it, like putting it in the little bag and like guessing whose shit it is. And, oh, who ate that? Oh, wait, and that's a dead mouse, so every moment I try to keep my to not be mindless. If you do things mindlessly or autopilot all the time, then you're not really in the game, right? Even driving, like we're so mindless with driving.
Oh yeah.
And I'm always mindful because people suck at driving anymore, and like I don't even know. Like I was talking to my friend Mike's, and he was saying how his kid said the new rule is whoever gets to a light first gets to go first. So if it's a left turn, he could just go. And apparently that's what people think, because I had a guy take a left turn right in front of me and then flipped me off when I was going straight through the intersection. And I'm like, wait, dude, I'm sorry I didn't get the memo that now it's fucking free for all on the roads, and it's not, but that's, it's just like whatever. But if I had been mindlessly driving, I would have just slammed into this guy. But I'm like, I'm going to just be very mindful in my moments. And especially, when I take the 911 out, it's pretty fast. And I've been known to go above the speed limit in legal way, of course. So, so that's kind of my thought. And then with the death thing, so this, I think the stages of grieving are really lost on people until they've gone through it a few times, right? So my buddy last week, or who died a few weeks ago, accidentally, we talked about this with guns and alcohol, and shot himself. It's really weighing on one of my friends. Like he's just not able to process it. He's just in anger all the time, and which is the second stage, right? And then I got past that, and then the third stage really is like what could I have done to help this from. And I look back and I'm like, man, the day before I was going to go visit this guy, and I'm like, the whole butterfly effect thing, right? Like if I'd gone and seen him, then he wouldn't have been partying the next night and gotten drunk and pulled his gun out and whatever. Probably wouldn't have changed anything. But I'm at that stage. And then the next stage is depression. And then you go to acceptance, right? So, but a lot of these friends of ours and even my wife are really having a hard time getting out of the anger part, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And um, so I was just trying to sit and talk to my buddy and be like, hey, man, look, these are normal stages of grieving, and your predictive brain is sitting there like, well, and I think they're at the point still where they think it's not real. Like, oh, he's going to just, like apparently when it happened, the guy that was with him called some other people and said, hey, he's dead. And they're like, oh, you're joking. And then they put a cop on, and the cop's like, yeah, he's dead. And they're like, oh, that's just another friend joking with me. Then they had to put a female cop on, and she's like, look, dude, it's real, So, um, and then everyone processes everything differently. Again, it's reality. What is your reality? What's my reality? Um, So I thought it was, I really leaned into my stoicism once that happened because, it was a guy I mentored and I considered a good friend. Um, so I just was like, okay, well, there's nothing you can do about this, right? He's gone. You have memories, good memories, super loving guy.
Hmm.
Um, but, I was talking to my wife about it and it was just sad because he never really had a deep girlfriend, deep love, and all the stuff that you want in life. Like you want this deep bond with a soulmate kind of thing. None of that happened because he fucked around and found out, right? And yeah, so that's kind of what um, I think last week's stoicism conversation kind of pushed into and I think it's a good thing to lean into when you're dealing with that kind of loss. I'm not saying we shouldn't be emotional, like I think all of those brewers that knew this guy cried when we found out. I'm not going to be like, well, whatever, I'm a tough dude, but there was that emotional element and like, holy shit, I'm never going to see this dude again, goofy bastard, So, and I know Kyle, you've gone through a situation very similar to that when you were, but younger and,
Hmm.
you know, so,
Well, to that point also, I mean, it's a fair time to remind our listeners and ourselves that stoicism does not mean you do not go through these emotions. It does not mean you don't feel them. It does not mean, Aurelius, Marcus Aurelius himself struggled with anger all his life. And he keeps mentioning it throughout the meditations. That's why we know, and scholars know, that he figured out about 7 or 8 different ways of how he handled his anger issues. Well, we don't even have that clinically. We don't even have that many methods today. Um, but it's not about a matter of not feeling it. It comes down to not acting on it. And and I like what you said about that mindfulness piece too, of bringing you back into this is what it is. And the more I continue to build narratives outside of that, feed those stages. It sounded like, when you were talking about, you know, Phoebe mentioning, wow, he never had deep love in his life. He never knew that aspect. He never got to feel all these different dimensions of feeling and experience in life. That also is sort of this identification of what is most important and most valuable to each her, or grieving is going to go to that dimension that we latch onto and
right.
find the most important in our lives to give it greater meaning. And it's yeah, it's that's a tough
Yeah, I
one.
think that,
But I like what you said about cycling through the stages
right.
and how they have to be allowed to cycle through. And in order to let that happen, I mean, you just have to let those play out and be aware and let them go. Let them cycle their way through. It's just I
Yeah.
don't have to act on it.
Well, and I think there's a level of frustration for some people that haven't really dealt with mindfulness or just self work, that this hits. And I think each stage probably is longer, like because they aren't used to dealing with emotions.
Mhm.
They aren't used, and they're used to repressing them or whatever the situation is, but they haven't really. And my buddy that's struggling said, he goes, I have a hard time dealing with anything emotional, you know,
Okay, that's
right,
fair.
right. So I think it pushes. Um, it makes the process longer, right? Because for us, having dealt with a bunch of shit and done self work, hopefully, we're able to process it quicker, accept it, and let our body accept it, and move through the stages maybe quicker than someone who's kind of emotionally repressed, I guess is the word,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
so yeah, it's just it's weird. I texted a high school friend and he was like, hey, how's things going? And I said, everything's good except for this. And then I told him the situation. I said, guy was 41 years old. And he's like, I'm mad now, because he's got so much life ahead of him that he'll never live because he was doing stupid shit.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that to me, that's the worst part, like, I think when I was 41, I guess I just married Phoebe, so my life was starting to get on the right track. But, I don't know. Um,
Okay, so let's take that right there, what you just said, and it is hard. It is hard. There's no way around that. All of this is hard. Death is hard. Loving, losing our loved ones is hard, and so is mindfulness. That's what I heard you just say, right? Okay. Well, maybe the reframe in something like this and the gift of that passing is that it forces us to grow up and dig deeper and get to know ourselves more. So where something we've lost something, maybe in a real roundabout way, he's teaching all of us to dig deep and get to know ourselves to a greater extent, where we have maybe blown most of ourselves, our own selves off most of our lives and ignored ourselves. Maybe it's a gift he left us that said, no, look at yourselves. Don't look at me. Get to know yourself.
yeah.
I don't,
Yeah. And
just a thought.
yeah, no, it could be. I mean, it could, I think that's a good way to look at it, and for me, whenever there's loss like that, I try to redouble my effort to find the beauty in situations, you know, and in life in general, But even then, with him passing, I looked through the text he had sent me, and there was one. He said, "This reminded me of you," and it was a little punk rock cat, with a spike collar, and I was like, and I was gonna delete all the texts. I'm like, well, it's done, But then I'm like, yeah, it's kind of. I'm gonna not delete them. They're kind of interesting. But, I think as far as death goes, it's such a weird um, thing for most people to think about, right? Like to
Hmm.
me, I've read like Sadhguru's death book, which was like, well, whatever. But it's as important as birth. It's just a stage, right? Like, a lot of
Hmm.
people are like, here's your soul, and they're gonna throw you down in this body to experience
Hmm.
physical the physical life, and
Hmm.
then you leave the physical life and your soul goes off again to do whatever, and maybe you just hang out in soul world or whatever it is, soul train, um or whatever that thing is, so to me I look at like, well, yeah, it's part of life. And um and then I talked to my little 8-year-old buddy about things, and like the concept of death is completely unknown to me.
Unknown. Yeah.
Like I'll watch him riding his bike down the street and a car comes flying around the thing and I'm like, oh, he's gonna get killed. I'm like, hey dude, you're gonna get run over. And he's like, yeah, so I'm like, you might die. And I don't think the concept of mortality is there. Like, and I think Kyle at your age is probably when I was like the most fearful of death. Now I'm like, whatever, Um, and and I think I don't know if you've gotten to that point yet, Kyle. I remember years ago I read this article. It was a former NFL player talking about in his 30s and 40s. He would wake up with night sweats and panics, and it's normal. Like no one talks about it, but I remember my buddy who's struggling with the death one day came to me. He was like, "Man, I've been waking up just freaking out," and I said, "It's just part of our existence, and it goes away, and it's nothing. It's your little monkey brain at night doing predictive stuff in the middle of the night." And I think it's like the first real awareness of our mortality. And I think your brain just kind of panics and like, I shouldn't be asleep because I only got so much time left. I don't know what the actual physiology is. That was 20 years ago. I read that article. But you know, I just wish there wasn't such a stigma about talking about death. Like
Yeah,
we
but
had more of a understanding, and I
Hmm.
think for a lot of people, it's just, that they don't think there's anything beyond this, and it's fearful. I mean, I remember Phoebe's grandmother right before she passed, and she was, religious, but right before she died, apparently she said to Phoebe's uncle, "I'm scared," you know, and
Hmm.
that really sums it up. No matter what, it's a fear, and it's a legitimate fear of the unknown. Like the fears that we have on day-to-day basis are just, our predictive machine saying this is what could happen. I've been in this situation before. This could happen, and then it doesn't. But that's the big question of what happens, right? And I think in the modern world, I mean, people are trying to have their brain put on the cloud so they can live forever or whatever. As bits and data,
Yeah.
ones and
It's.
zeros.
I like what you said. That fear of the unknown. So what we're going to do with our predictive, we're going to run a predictive sort of narrative to mitigate, um, to still be in control of the unknown, as though there's something wrong with the unknown. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem with the unknown is it's the unknown, right?
Hmm.
Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows, right?
Right.
So it's the great question is what it is, and I mean this goes to all the faith traditions, everything. Like trying to answer that, and
And to deal with that, and that's why, of course, Stoicism started. It was to handle that fear of the unknown, and
uh,
and yeah.
oh, and I saw an article today that fear. I think Harvard maybe what did it that fear ages people faster.
Hmm.
So the higher your fear level, um,
Your cortisol is constantly running through the
yeah,
roof, and it
yeah.
ages you. Yeah.
yeah, um this is a really, really big one, especially for me, because I've dealt with, for the last like 6 years, I've dealt with death. And I mean, my own personal experience with it. And you had mentioned something, Alan, about like the stigma around it. And McCrae and I were talking this week, and we were talking about the culture that we live in, and the narrative that the culture that we live in dictates how we view death. And
Mhm.
one of the things that, I mean, if you look at um many other cultures that we have, and I'm ignorant to what those actually are, but I know that there are other cultures that have that tendency to celebrate it, and to, as it's this transitional phase, and like, good for you. But this culture that we have in America is very based around fear, and being afraid of that unknown. And the the problem when we're faced with death is that it forces us into a state of vulnerability. And if if anyone listening hasn't been forced into that state of vulnerability, or isn't familiar with like that emotion of vulnerability, it's very challenging to navigate through for the first time, because that is that that it's the emotional equivalent of having all of our armor taking off of us in the middle of a battle. So it's like, okay, we're in the midst of a war, people are swinging swords, and there's arrows zipping by you. Well, guess what, your fucking armor's gone now. And if you haven't felt and fully embraced like what that is, it is terrifying the first time that you have to experience. And a lot of, I mean, I was mentioning before we started the podcast, I've been doing it through my process of like circumambulation and kind of coming back to some of these revisiting topics, because like I said, that like death is a big one for me. I have big T trauma around death. I had a very similar experience, with someone shooting themselves, but like I was 6 feet away from the guy when that happened. And so I had to process through I had to process death, and then I had to process the imagery, and I had to go through the stages of grief, and I went through all of the guilt around that, and the what ifs, and the anger, and like, how the fuck could you do this to me? And like all these, like, it is a messy process. And I had to come to this conclusion that when we're dealing with loss, it's something that I think that thinking does a little bit, to help kind of like piece together, okay, like this is, the reality of the situation. But for me, when I've been really digging into this last month of, I don't think grief is something that you think your way through. It's something that you feel your way through. When we have that that moment that is so out of our control, when it's something that I have, this is the one thing that I've dealt with in my entire life where thinking has failed me. And believe me, I tried to think my way out of it. I tried to use stoicism, I tried to use acceptance, I tried to use like CBT stuff. I try to like any type of like, I this is the one thing, like death is the only thing that I cannot think my way through. It's something that I have to feel and embrace. What does it feel like that this person is gone now? And that was a challenging place for me to get to, because that means that like we have to feel discomfort. And that is so challenging to do, if because we have this culture right now, especially within the culture of men, that like men don't cry, and breaking through that societal stigma around like how we're supposed to process our emotions. Because if you think back to beginning of the 1900s, I mean, you think about how many wars were happening, and like how there was things that were happening that you just had to soldier up, push your shit down, pretend it doesn't exist, and then pick up your gun and keep moving forward. And it's like not the reality of the situation that we're living in right now, but a lot of people are still living in that place through generational trauma and having like that, that lowercase stoic, detaching from your emotions, not feeling and just, shouldering the burden and keep going. But we're at this place in society now where I think that we're starting to lean into what does it mean to actually feel so that you can connect with yourself and so that you can connect with other people, which are the same thing. And for the men that are listening right now, like I'm there with you. I know what it feels like to not want to feel the way that you do. I know what it feels like to not want to shed a tear in front of other people. I know like that discomfort that comes up and that level of vulnerability because it makes you look like a bitch. That thought that kind of comes up that like if I show any type of emotion or if I lean into this emotion, it's going to make me look weak. Like I understand that thought process, and I'm here to tell you that it's just not true. Like I really think that when it comes to death, the only way to get out of that, and this is coming from someone who has dealt with a lot of death, and especially in my recovery, you got to feel it. You got to sit with it. You got to be with that feeling. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's not that feeling isn't going to kill you, but being able to just sit there, have a cry over it,
Mm-hmm.
let that emotion like envelop you like to your core, and like really feel the pain of like what that actually did to you, you will feel better. Now, that doesn't necessarily change the situation. That doesn't change or discredit anything that's happened, but you will feel a little bit better if you can embrace, like, oh my God, the anguish of like whatever that is. And the more that I've like dug into like the death thing, we talk like you guys were talking about, having to face our own mortality. Like I really came to the conclusion is about a month ago, um, when I started looking at all my death stuff, that it is my mortality that I am viewing when I see someone else die.
Mm-hmm.
If I hear about someone else dying, it's like it's not about the other person at first. The first thing that comes into my mind is I'm looking at myself and I'm being like, holy shit, like that's going to be me one day. And I don't know what that is. And so getting to terms with like your own mortality is also incredibly challenging. But that's like just for the sake of awareness, like that's the thing. Like when I went through and I really started breaking down my trauma around death, like the very, very first thing that came up, when that guy died that one night was like my own safety. I'm looking at like like holy shit, like I could have died and and then the thoughts come up of, have I lived the life, of like fulfillment? Like, have I served my purpose in life? Like, if this was my moment to die right now, like, would I be okay with it? And I've come to understand because I've faced with that, I've dealt with, suicide attempts and like all those kinds of things. And looking back at like all of those things that have happened to me, there's been moments when I've been faced with death where I was okay with it, and there was moments that I wasn't okay with it. And I think a lot of the moments that like I was okay with it, it's because I was living in alignment with like my purpose or my bliss or like any of those kinds of things. So it's like, if this was my moment to go, I'm okay with it because I've done everything to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
But then there were other moments where I was faced with it where like I knew in the back of my head that like shit, I'm not living the life that I need to be living right now. And so if I were to die right now, I'm almost a disappointment not only to other people but to myself. And that's a really really hard thing to have to wrestle with. And so, but like death just brings up so much for people. And I really I've really started to try to shift my thinking away from like the social narrative that like, we as Americans experience of, it is this, this horrible moment and try to look at it as this moment of like celebration, of like like I don't know. I've tried to break a lot of like the bias around that, and it's hard though. It's really hard to do.
And this is exactly why Stoicism came to be, is
Mhm.
over this one topic of death. And because it's the ultimate, it's the big one.
Mhm.
And what else is there to fear? I mean, you know, everything else is a challenge in life, but that's the big one, right? I really like what you said and how you address all of us men
Mhm.
in the world, and that what you said, Kyle, was really cool. That okay, what's the risk for all of us men if we don't see these moments in our lives where loved ones pass, and we don't seize the opportunity to delve deep into our own emotions and wrap ourselves in that blanket of pain and really take from the experience our own deep self and get in touch with every single emotion and the way that it makes you feel, in anger, in frustration, in just sadness, um, that is nothing other than just sadness. Okay, no one isolated in and of itself. So I don't throw any other emotion into just sadness. If I'm not familiar with those within myself, what's the risk? The risk is that we go out into the world and we just act them out without us being aware of them. And you mentioned the word, yeah, we're going through the world acting like little bitches because we don't know ourselves. And so we are prone to just fly off the handle at our loved ones in a fit of rage, and we don't know why. All these things, that's the risk. So this also speaks to the shadow piece.
Mhm.
And it also speaks that it's going to emerge if you're not familiar with you and you don't know you, then how can you control you in an
Mhm.
outward way in the world? So we're not showing up as our full authentic self because we're being compromised by the, as you said, Alan, the hard drive. It's all dirty. I got some bad algorithms in there, and I'm too fearful to go in and allow those to emerge and get to know those sides of me. Then I'm going to just act it out. And that is fearful, not only as an individual, but then in the collective society. And that's a big danger, big, big problem we got now. So yeah, I you had some great points there, man. Great points.
Yeah. Yeah,
And this
yeah.
also brings to the mind, that momentum mori, you know, always keep death before your eyes. So
Mhm.
there, you're going to die. So what are you doing now? So it puts you in a state of questioning right now. What am I doing? And I liked also that you had said that when you are not you're at the least fearful state, you then you're in your flow. You're in life and you're checking the boxes. You have nothing to uncheck. You're doing
Mhm.
it. You're fulfilling your life's purpose here of what you were supposed to do in your most authentic self.
Mhm.
So you're ready to go at any time. And that
Mhm.
is a supreme way to live. Is if I go tomorrow, man, I'm done. I'm fine with that because, I'm content with myself.
Mhm.
And I think I've come here to do what I was supposed to do. And that reminded you guys reminded me that when I was sobering up, I went through a phase of just wanting to gather all kinds of philosophy and spiritual wisdom and
Mm,
knowledge and brain science and all kinds of, everything I could get my hands on. I went down a rabbit hole for a while, and I don't know why I went down this, but I enjoyed it, which was NDEs, near death experiences. And going through a phase for like a month or better where I just listened to their stories of what did they experience when they crossed over. And because I wanted to, I don't know why I did that, but I think in doing so, as I looked back, what it really helped me do was it gave me a peace of mind,
mm,
and it slammed me back into my almost present moment. There's not a moment to lose, not a moment, not a breath to lose in this life. Because you don't know, we don't know when we're going to go. So it's like it puts you in a real here and now state. It did for me at that time. And I think it's once you start to see it that way, that's something you can't unsee. It is, yeah, but it did help me. It in a weird way.
yeah. I do want to say that I I have a tremendous amount of like compassion and empathy for you, Alan, for what you're experiencing right now, and what Phoebe and like
Mm,
all your friends. And I mean the only advice is just be kind to yourself, be
hmm
gentle to yourself through this process. And um you just approach yourself with like that softness. Because the way that I look at it is that, how would you want to show up for a friend that was experiencing the same pain that you're experiencing right now? Like you would want to give them a fucking hug, right? And let them
Yeah.
know that like it's not okay right now, but it will be okay. And approaching ourselves from that same place, because that's, oh, for anyone who's listening who's experienced something like that, like it is one of the most challenging things that you will deal with as a human. And it's already challenging enough, without us beating the shit out of ourselves through the whole process of going through that.
Well,
I mean,
the
that's
good thing that's come out of all of this, and the guy that died was the first man probably that ever said "I love you" to me. No homo, like in a philia, like brotherly love way. Um, and since this has happened, like my other brewer friends now are like, "I love you." Every time we talk,
hmm
and it's really um, opened some doors, I think, maybe for them and me to experience joy, pain, all the emotions more, um, and have more of an understanding of each other. Because so many, especially with men, our relationships can be super superficial. Like we don't. I have that book that I've never finished called "I Don't Want to Talk About It." How men don't like to talk about their problems, emotions, because it makes you look weak or whatever. So it's interesting to see how the dynamic has changed and how these guys are maybe able to be more in touch with themselves or their emotions, and maybe it's, goes back to you seeing your own mortality and you're like, holy shit, we're all going to die. I don't want to die and let my friend know that I never said I love you to him because
hmm
it seems weak or whatever. So I think there's that. I think there's always a positive that'll come out of things generally. I mean, I think I was 13 when I watched someone die, maybe 12. And it was horrible. Like it was a gruesome auto accident. And I was the first one on the scene, and it
Mm,
was ex- exceptionally unpleasant. Um, and it really tainted my thoughts about death, sort of. You know what I'm saying? Like it, even though it was gruesome, it was kind of peaceful. Well, I don't know. It was fucked up. But I
yeah.
remember the cops and firemen came over because I'm like this 12-year-old kid, like staring at this faceless dude with eyeballs going side to side as he's dying, and his face had been ground off. Um, and they were like, "Do you want to talk to someone like a therapist?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm good." And maybe it was because I loved horror movies so much that I was just like, "It's just a movie. It's
Mm,
this isn't real." Um, but yeah, I mean, we just look at death so weird, like.
yeah.
But the upside is like and it goes back to mindfulness. Be in the moment. This is it. This is all you've got. This moment right now, it might end in 1 second.
Hmm.
So be fully engaged in whatever you're doing. Like if you're having a conversation, be engaged in that conversation. Don't be staring at your phone. It's just a pet peeve. Like we'll go out somewhere and we'll see a whole family staring at their phones at a restaurant. I'm like, why?
Mm,
Have a conversation. There's a person right across from you that you put the effort to go and be somewhere with. Be there with them.
hmm.
Don't be like, oh, look at this. Who gives a fuck about any of that stuff? Right.
Yeah.
So, um, I try to look at the positive of this situation. Um, and look at, we were talking about the guy who died and how much love he just radiated to all of us, um, and his best friend had committed suicide not long, a few years ago. And I think he really struggled with that. Um, and I, I don't know what goes on in people's brains, obviously, again, that it's everyone's reality is their reality.
Well, what's interesting too is that you just said that we're going to fill in the blanks with all the what ifs, right? And that's what really keeps us in that perpetual state also of heartache, sadness, because we're stewing in the what ifs. Well, here's that piece of grounding me into the reality. What is? Well, what is what you just explained, is that it's an opportunity to go back to danger or crisis, right,
Hmm.
Kyle? In the Chinese symbol for crisis is both danger and opportunity. So yeah,
Hmm.
we're going to stare into the danger and we're going to stare into the all the what ifs to keep us in a perpetual state of sadness and that heartache, because that's an not only is that an easy place to go to gravitate towards, but it's a very comforting one,
Hmm.
because it also signals to the brain, hey, we're at discomfort, we're at unease right now. The most challenging one is to look at the other side of the coin, which is this is a 50-50. And what is coming of it is a greater opportunity for all of you and your friends and all of his acquaintances to pull together, get to know themselves better at a deeper, richer level, get to really reevaluate. He allowed everybody in his whole entire class to reevaluate themselves, their values, their morals, and love. And really, I mean, he's allowed, it sounds to me, I mean, I'm looking at that side of the coin, but I didn't know him. Um, but from all of your stories, what I'm hearing is a big 50-50 on this one. Like, it's almost as if the kid came to earth. he served his purpose because he just schooled about a whole ton of people real fast on what love means at a deeper, richer level. And he schooled all of you real fast on it was a wake up call, it sounds like, to reevaluate yourselves at a deeper level. You can't, in getting to know also his community, but let's start with ourselves. And I think it's almost like his passing has really held a mirror up to everybody's face. And it sounds on the outside, yeah, it's a horrible thing, but maybe, just maybe, that was his purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
he sure did it. I'm sorry. I know there's pain, and I totally agree with you, Kyle, with move with compassion and allow these stages to pass through and feel it and really feel it. But also with that feeling of the pain, see the lessons he came here to teach you. And there's a beauty in that. And maybe we can't see it right away, but in time, hopefully, that will help us get us through. So to allow enough space for us to take our minds off of the what if to what is.
It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, in the vein, I love both of you. Grateful that that we're able to do this. Um, Alan, so sorry that
Yeah.
that y'all
Yeah.
are having to go through all that stuff. Um, yeah. For all the men listening, tell tell everyone you fucking love them. Tell your best friend you love them. Give them a hug. Um, we're going through a pretty rough time. I mean, everyone's going through a rough time, but men are going through a pretty rough time, and they're going through it silently right now. And for any men that are listening, like you don't have to fight your fight alone. You know, um, God, yeah,
Yeah, it's
powerful
a
topic,
burden,
difficult
I
topic.
think, sorry, Kyle,
No,
but I
you're good.
think, we men carry this burden so silently. And years ago, I saw this guy talking about it, and like how no one like understands how much we think about. Like we have to have family. If you have children, you have this stuff to worry about and keep everything together so other people don't struggle, right? So then you put yourself on the back burner, and sometimes if you're not prepared for it, or it can destroy you, right? So and it's just it's this suffering in silence, and but knowing you have to do it, like, right, be a provider, be a protector, it's our biological role. I don't think that being a warrior is bad. I think you got to do that. And a lot of modern society has taken that role away from us, partly, like we don't have to go out and kill shit and bring it back so our family doesn't starve to death. But metaphorically, we do, right? So I think men suffer more than anyone really realizes. Um,
Yeah.
and once you understand that and you can talk about it and be like, "Fuck, this is fucked up," this situation I'm in is bad. And everyone else like, "Yeah, we're in the same boat, dude. You're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine." And I always tell people, it's always gonna be fine. No matter what you're going through, everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is the end of the world," kind of shit. And then a year later, like, wow, it wasn't that big. It seemed like it was the end of the world at the time, but now it was nothing, right? Because we're adaptable, you know.
But there's a lot in that moment of learning to do for you. So there's an opportunity there. it'll be fine. But in the meantime, I'm to a point where I'm like, man, don't lose the opportunity, because it's either a matter of in a year from now, if I gloss over this and forget about it, and push it down, I'll still be where I'm at, and things will get back to normal. Or there's another way to look at it. Hey, what did this opportunity teach me about myself to be better? Um, that's the scary part. That's the hardest part. That's the hardest journey. You can take the long road, or you can take the windy, one that's full of thorns. And it, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Our culture at large is really horrible because we're raised to be like machines, and we're not machines. And that works until it doesn't. And then we're going to go reward and escape and hide some way to bury and repress this. And then you go crow's route and you start drinking about it.
Yeah, I think we are kind of machines, though. Like you got a brain that's a computer, this hands, everything is a machine, like, right?
Except these emotions.
Right.
What,
Yeah. Yeah.
what do
Those
we do
fucking
with those
emotions,
fucking
man.
So
emotions?
that
My,
really,
what
that
what about
predictive,
my fucking feelings, Alan?
yeah,
What do I do with
feelings,
those little things?
yes.
What are those?
Well,
Yeah,
but,
right, right.
I think part of consciousness is that predictive brain and being able to override it, right? Like that's what make the predictive brain is part of a machine,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to rewrite that machine is kind of your consciousness. Like I'm aware of
Yeah.
this, I'm mindful of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I look at a dog. I love my dogs, but they're just little machines, right? Ants are machines. They're just programmed to walk, go find something dead, bring it back so they can all eat. Or bees, they're just little machines. They
And
fly
we're
out and
programmed the same way.
yeah,
Go hit a time clock, punch in, go
right.
home, pay your bills, do your thing,
Well,
and then
yeah, but that's not you. That's external. I mean, you could go and just live under a bridge and drink the creek water and eat some slugs or whatever's around. So you're not part of that thing. So I don't think that your external life has any real bearing on the fact you're a machine, right? Like the ants are doing that because that's what they're programmed to do.
instant.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like, well, fuck, I'm an ant and this is bullshit that I have to go, or a honeybee, I have to go get shit off the flowers and bring it back and make honey. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to invent a rocket. So that's not, so I think the fact that we are machines, right? And the only thing that delineates us from less sentient beings maybe is this consciousness and the ability to reprogram,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a dog isn't really going to reprogram itself. He's not going to be like, well, today I'm driving a car, you know, right? Like it's not happening. But you could say, today I'm going to completely reinvent myself and I'm going to go on, like Kyle's going to school. Or I could say, I'm going to go do this. And then you're rewriting your program, right? Not necessarily a predictive program, but you have free will and choice. And it's all, that's kind of what delineates us from being just a machine. So, but
So what sets us apart? Well, not to that point, but it you brought another point to mind, which is we have the choice.
right, free will.
We have free will, and so it comes down to what are we choosing to focus on? And am I and back to this earlier conversation, this all day long here, is what am I choosing to focus on? The gift of this moment, or or the downside, everything that should have been, could have been. So I have that choice of focus. What do I choose to? Because what I focus on is my reality. That's my choice. And my choice is different than your choice or anybody else's. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Kyle there and say, because I didn't know this young man, but man, my heart goes out to you, to everybody in your circle that did. It sounds like you were all blessed to know him. And now I wish I would have known him uh the way you guys did, because it sounds like he was one heck of a dude to get you all this hurt. So that comes with high regards right off the bat. So my loss that I didn't get to know him, and it's also my loss that I don't get to share in you guys' grief. So send my best.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, interesting conversation today. You know,
Necessary though.
Necessary.
Necessary.
yeah. I
Very.
mean, well, it's just part of the whole existential part of our lives. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? And I mean, philosophers been asking this for thousands of years, right? We're not
Mm-hmm.
going to answer it,
No.
but we can try to live every day in a loving, compassionate way and understanding
Mm-hmm.
and not being judgmental, and trying to just be nice, be nice to people, even people
And
that
to
are
yourself.
jerks to you.
Take care of yourself. There you go, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of yourselves. Yeah.
It's tough. Okay.
Right on.
All right, gentlemen. What are you grateful for today?
I'll go first. No, I won't go first because I haven't really thought about it. And
Well, I'll say it right now to all of you and to our listeners, man, I love you. I do love you. I appreciate you at a deep, deep, deep level. I really do. Um, I'm grateful for my health. It's just rocking. So I just, I'm always grateful for that. And I'm grateful for my family. I just found out that I've got another great grandniece. So is that right? Yes, that's right. So that's pretty cool. I'm really, really happy about that. Family keeps growing, and as I'm getting older, so that's cool, man. So I'm very, very grateful.
Nice.
Everything's awesome. Kyle, how about you?
I am grateful. Like I said, just to follow up with you, Crow, grateful for you guys. I love you guys. I'm grateful for all of my particularly like my male friends. That's something that, in the vein of the conversation today, we don't show each other enough love. And I'm very grateful for my dudes, you know.
Mhm.
I am I had a moment this morning where, in this vein of like trying to be present and pay attention to what I'm doing, where I was driving to the gym this morning and the sun was coming up and I was, oh my God, so grateful for the sunrise, like over the marshes and over like some of the wetlands and stuff that we have here in Savannah. And I'm driving over. I live out on an island, and so I have to drive over a bridge that goes over a huge river. And so seeing like the reflection of the sunrise, and then it was just made me so incredibly grateful to be able to be alive to witness stuff like that, and to have the opportunity to um, see that kind of stuff on a regular basis. And I am also grateful. I'm grateful for my mood. I think my mood has been rather pleasant lately. Now that I'm, not getting so caught up in my thoughts. And yeah, it, I think I'm starting to experience life a little bit differently now. And so I'm very grateful for that experience.
Nice. Nice.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mr.
well,
Allen?
I'm grateful for everyone that's come into my life, good or bad. I've learned something, you know. Some things are painful, some things are joyful, some things are just shit. I'm glad I learned that, you know. I don't discount anyone because of their situation or place in life. Um, so I'm grateful to be open to that. I think when I was younger, I was definitely very resistant to thinking that I could learn from someone who wasn't, um, schooled or whatever. And now I know that, you know, as my current favorite musician Jerry Cinnamon says, "Schools run by fools, leave to get education." So and I'm really glad for life educating me.
Hmm.
And in your vein, Kyle, the nature experience last night, we just had an epic sunset. I was down
Mm.
feeding the dogs, and I could see the glow coming through the basement windows. So I ran out, and it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So just to be able to be in that moment and not, um, just being mindfulness of the beauty, like not thinking about anything, just watching. So, yeah, and I'm grateful, for all my male friends as well, that and hope that they can get on the path that helps them become whole, like what we're doing this for, I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
out the wholeness, I see a lot of them that just can't cope with the pressures of life, and I mean, we all did it in one way or another, alcohol,
Hmm.
overeating, drugs, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, just glad to be alive, have people I love around me, and you know, be honest and truthful. I sent Crow something last weekend about friends and how the best kind of friends can be totally honest. And
Hmm.
it's sometimes really hard to be totally honest with people because you don't want to hurt them. But honestly, not being honest hurts them even more. So
Yep.
when I tell you get your shit together, it's because I love you. So, and I say it to myself every day, that. So I got to do it. So anyhow,
Cool.
that's it.
All
Right
right.
on.
Well, all right. Love you guys. Thank you everyone for tuning in. For all the listeners, if you're on Spotify, go check us out on Instagram at the lighter dot minds. Go check us out on YouTube at the lighter minds. Like, subscribe, share, let all your friends know about it. Yeah, tune into the next episode.